Harlem is not just a place on a map. It is a heartbeat. It is music in the air, prayers in the walls, laughter in the streets, and pain hidden behind proud faces. In the early 1930s, that heartbeat was under pressure, squeezed tight by hunger, racism, and the cold math of survival. Every block had eyes, every corner had a story, and every man walking alone at night carried a question in his chest. Would he make it home? And on one sharp night in 1934, one fight cut through Harlem like lightning, and the name Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stopped being just a name people knew. It became a warning people felt in their bones. This story is not about a hero painted clean. It is not about a villain made simple. It is about a man who learned early that the world could be unfair, and who decided he would never be small inside it. It is about a neighborhood that loved him, feared him, needed him, and sometimes suffered because of him. It is about power, pride, and the kind of respect that is bought with blood and courage. And it begins long before the fight that made Harlem whisper his nickname with a new kind of fear. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and even the way people later talked about him makes it sound like trouble followed him from the start. He got the name Bumpy because of a bump on his head, a small mark that somehow turned into a legend. But the real mark was not on his skin. It was in his spirit. People who wrote about his early life describe a boy who did not bow his head easily, even when the world demanded it. He was smart, quick, and proud, and in the South at that time, pride in a black boy could be dangerous. Wikipedia: his family worried about his temper and the way he stood up to white people, because standing up could cost more than a beating. It could cost your life. So when he was still young, he was sent north to Harlem to live with his older sister. It was supposed to be safer. It was supposed to calm him down. But Harlem did not calm boys like Bumpy. Harlem sharpened them. Wikipedia: when Bumpy arrived, Harlem was full of voices and promises, but it was also full of hard rules. You could hear jazz pouring out of doorways, smell food cooking in crowded apartments, and see men in pressed suits trying to look richer than they were. But behind the bright surface was a neighborhood crowded with struggle. Jobs were scarce, rents were high, and police could treat black people like they did not matter. In that world, the underground economy was not just crime for many people. It was a way to eat, a way to pay rent, a way to survive when legal doors stayed locked. Harlem in those years could look busy and alive, yet heavy with the weight of the Great Depression and the daily fight to stay proud. You can almost feel that tension when you look at old street scenes from Harlem, with faces that look both tired and strong, as if everyone is carrying something they cannot put down. Harlem street scene photo. Bumpy was not just muscle. He was not just a man with fists. He was known for being sharp, for reading people, for thinking ahead. In Harlem, that kind of mind could make you valuable fast, but it could also make you a target. When you are young and hungry, you learn quickly that respect is like money. It has to come from somewhere. Some people earn it through hard work. Some people steal it. Some people take it by force. And some people, like Bumpy, learn to blend all of it until nobody can tell where one ends and the other begins. He began moving closer to the world of gambling rackets, especially the numbers game, an illegal lottery that many people played because it offered hope in a hopeless time. The numbers game was not just about betting. It was about community money moving through hidden hands. It hired runners, helped pay bills, and sometimes even supported local needs, even though it was illegal. The game could lift a family for a day or crush them for a week, but it was everywhere. In that world, one name rose like a crown: Stephanie St. Clair. She was known as a powerful numbers banker, a woman who held ground in a world of men. People called her Madame Queenie, the numbers queen, and she did not get those names by being gentle. She fought for her business, fought for her pride, and also fought in her own way for Harlem to control Harlem. Historians describe her as a major figure in Harlem's gambling world during the 20s and 30s. Gotham Center St. Clair employed Bumpy Johnson as an enforcer, and that relationship mattered. It gave Bumpy a place near real power. It taught him how money flows, how loyalty works, and how fear can be shaped into something useful. And it placed him in the path of a coming storm. The route: if you look at the few known photos of St. Clair, You see a woman who does not look like she is asking permission for anything. That image helps explain why someone like Bumpy could respect her, and why someone like her would choose someone like him to stand at her side. Stephanie St. Clair Foe. The storm had a name that carried fear in many parts of New York: Dutch Schultz. Schultz was a white gangster who, according to common accounts of Harlem's underworld history, pushed into Harlem's rackets and tried to take control of the numbers business. That push meant more than money. It meant a message that Harlem's own people could be pushed aside in their own neighborhood. It meant humiliation. It meant outsiders deciding who gets to eat. The conflict between St. Clair's side and Schultz's side is widely described as violent, with sources noting a war for control that led to many killings. Whether every number in the stories is perfect or not, the meaning is clear. People were dying, and Harlem was caught in a battle that was bigger than any one person. Wikipedia Black Past You can find Schultz's face in old photos, and it is strange how ordinary it can look, because fear often wears an ordinary face until it is standing in your doorway. Dutch Schultz photo by 1934. Harlem was tense like a clenched fist. People had heard about killings, betrayals, raids, and threats. Police pressure and gangster pressure could come from different directions, but they both felt heavy on the same shoulders. Bumpy was rising in that world, and rising meant being tested. It meant being watched by enemies and friends at the same time. It meant every small moment could turn into a big moment. The stories that survive from that time often mix fact with legend, because Harlem did not write everything down. Harlem remembered. Harlem repeated. Harlem turned moments into warnings for the next person who thought about crossing the wrong line. And then came the fight. The moment people later pointed to and said, "That is when the fear became real." The details of the exact fight in 1934 are not always recorded in clean, official ways, the kind that make historians comfortable. That is part of what makes the story feel like smoke and shadow. But what matters in a documentary story is not only the exact angle of every punch. What matters is what the moment meant, and why it traveled from mouth to mouth across the neighborhood. In Harlem's criminal world, an insult could be as dangerous as a weapon. A threat could be as real as a bullet, and a public challenge could force a man to answer in public or lose everything he has built. Bumpy's reputation was not built on being loud all the time. It was built on being certain. When people believed he would act, they did not need to see him act every day. They just needed to believe that if you crossed him, the cost would come. So when that fight happened, it was not just a fight. It was a message sent through fists and fear. People saw or heard that Bumpy did not back away, that he could face danger directly, that he could survive a moment that would break other men. And after that night, the rumors around Harlem did what rumors do. They grew stronger. They grew sharper. They made him bigger than his body, bigger than his real life, until his name itself felt like a weapon. There is a difference between being dangerous and being feared. Plenty of men can hurt someone. Fear is something else. Fear is when people change their choices because they think you might act, even if you are not there. Fear is when your enemies plan around you, your friends whisper about you, and strangers look away because they do not want trouble to notice them. Bumpy became feared because his violence, when it came, was not random. It was connected to pride, to territory, to respect, to control. Harlem was a place where many people had so little control over their lives that they clung to any kind of power they could find. Bumpy understood that. He used it. He shaped it. And the fight in 1934 fed that belief that he was not a man you could push. Power in Harlem's underworld did not come with peace. It came with enemies. It came with police attention. It came with late nights, paranoia, and the heavy work of keeping people loyal. When Bumpy rose, he did not rise into sunlight. He rose into a darker kind of spotlight. Accounts of his life show repeated prison time over the years, and that is part of the pattern with men like him. The streets make you, but the streets also lead you toward cages. Even when a man is strong, the system around him can be stronger, and the state has endless time to wait for you to slip. Wikipedia still, in Harlem, many people did not only see him as a criminal. Some saw him as someone who could help, someone who could protect, someone who could solve problems that the city ignored. That is how complicated these stories get. A man can be feared by some and appreciated by others, and both feelings can be true at the same time. Photographs of Bumpy later in life, including images associated with his imprisonment, show a man with a steady stare, the kind of stare that makes you wonder what he is thinking. Prison can break men, but it can also harden them, and it can also educate them in strange ways, teaching patience, teaching discipline, teaching how to read people even better. Bumpy Johnson photo in Harlem, the legend grew even when he was away. Sometimes legends grow faster when the person is not there, because people can fill the empty space with whatever they need. Some needed a symbol of Harlem's strength. Some needed a warning to keep young men in line. Some needed a story that made the neighborhood feel like it had its own king, not just landlords and politicians who did not care. The neighborhood that shaped him and the neighborhood he shaped Harlem shaped Bumpy, but Bumpy also shaped Harlem's underworld structure. When power shifts, people adjust their lives around it. Business owners decide who to pay off. Runners decide who to work for. Young boys decide who to copy. Mothers decide which streets to tell their kids to avoid. The numbers game itself became part of Harlem's hidden economy, and while it harmed some people through gambling losses, it also provided work and money in a time when legal opportunity was limited. That is not an excuse. It is the context. It is the reason these systems take root, and it is why a figure like Bumpy could be seen as both a problem and a protector, depending on where you stood. Gotham Center. If you want to understand why a fight could change everything, you have to understand that Harlem was already living on the edge. When life feels unstable, people look for strong figures, even dangerous ones, because danger can feel like strength when you have nothing else. There is always a gap between what happened and what people say happened. With Bumpy, that gap can be wide. Stories online often grow dramatic fast because the name sells and because people love a myth. But even when you strip away the exaggeration, the outline remains. He was real. His influence was real. His ties to Harlem's gambling world were real. His association with Stephanie St. Clair is widely noted. The violent struggle for Harlem rackets against Dutch Schultz is part of the common historical narrative around that era. Wikipedia Black Past the Fight in 1934 in this story stands for the kind of moment where reputation becomes heavier than the man himself. Whether every listener hears the same version is less important than the truth that Harlem believed it. And belief can move crowds, change behavior, and build a king out of a street fighter. Bumpy's legacy did not end with 1 year or one fight. The idea of him traveled into books, films, and modern television, where truth and fiction blend. That lasting interest shows how deeply Harlem's story, and his story, still pulls at people. Even images inspired by him in popular culture remind us that the world keeps returning to this question. What does it mean when a community is forced to find its own protection in the shadows? Rolling out. But the deeper legacy is not entertainment. The deeper legacy is how his name became a symbol. For some, a symbol of Harlem pride that refused to be stepped on. For others, a symbol of how crime can become a form of leadership when real leadership fails. And for many, a reminder that fear is a kind of power that always demands payment, sooner or later. So when we say 1934 was the year one Harlem fight made Bumpy feared, we are not just talking about fists and blood. We are talking about a turning point in belief. We are talking about a neighborhood watching a man stand his ground in a time when so many people were forced to step aside. We are talking about Harlem deciding in that moment that this man was not just another hustler, not just another gunman, not just another name that would fade. His name would stick. Bumpy Johnson came from the South with fire in his chest, and Harlem gave that fire a stage. He learned power from the numbers game, learned strategy by standing close to Stephanie St. Clair, and learned the price of pride in a world where pride could get you killed. The war over Harlem's rackets, with Dutch Schultz pressing in, turned the streets into a battlefield, and in that pressure cooker, Bumpy's reputation hardened into something that could not be ignored. Wikipedia Gotham Center. And when that fight came, it did what the best documentary moments do. It revealed a truth that had been building quietly for years. The truth that Harlem fear was not random. It had a name now. It had a face. It had a man who would not flinch. That is how legends are born in real places. Not in clean rooms, not in perfect stories, but in streets where people are hungry, proud, and desperate to matter. Harlem did not just watch Bumpy Johnson rise. Harlem felt it. And after 1934, Harlem remembered it. If you want, I can write a second version that leans more toward strict, documented biography, using only the most verifiable points from major references like biography, Black Past, and academic NYC history sources, while keeping the same documentary tone and your exact formatting rules.